Matthews, chair of the Maryland Democratic Party, and Matt Larosiere from Young Voices joining us tonight with this angle. Good to have you both in here.
Thank you for inviting us both.
Matt, we had you in here a couple of days ago, but we've been hearing a little bit more from both sides. I'm curious how you think that you see the president, the tack he's taking right now since the shooting last week.
The president's stance is very interesting because it may or may not be political suicide. I mean, if this is just positioning, if this is just a diversion, it'll be fine. But if he moves through on any of the three things he's suggested, it will probably cost him really big points with his base.
Kathleen?
I have to say I am cheering these students, the students from Parkland, Florida, but also students here in the D.C. area who actually left their school, Richard Montgomery and other schools, and went down to the Capitol to make sure their voices were heard, their courage and their commitment. And I think we have to do all we can to try to amplify their voices, to make sure that we take this outrage to action. I mean, similar to the Women's March a year ago, women showed up, and now you have twice as many women running for Congress, House and Senate in America. That's action. And that's what we have to see in terms of real tangible legislation. I think this is another great moment we have to capture. We saw action after Sandy Hook and Newtown, Connecticut, where states like Maryland passed tough bans against assault weapons. This is another moment to look at closing loopholes in background checks, trying to figure out, can we have another?
However, we learned today that down in Florida, there was an armed guard. The armed guard was not in the school at the time, was outside the school.
Didn't go.
Did not go in. He had since resigned. Does the NRA have, do they have a tangible role at the table here when we talk about how to prevent these shootings?
I mean, I wonder why we consider the NRA to be this end-all, be-all of Second Amendment constitutional intelligence. I mean, they're not. This is one organization, you know, and this is an extremely complicated matter. We're talking about applying law to a nation of 300 million people to prevent something that is incredibly rare. I mean, if we want to talk about gun deaths in this country, you know, honestly, a school is the safest place you are. You're the least likely to be shot in school. I think it's a bit disingenuous to be focusing so much on school if your topic is going to be gun violence. I think it's a lot more direct to focus on the more than half of gun homicides that occur as a direct result of the drug war.
So whether it's in schools where they seem to be happening more frequently, at concerts like the Las Vegas concert, in movie theaters, or on the streets like yesterday morning when an off-duty Prince George's County police officer tried to help a neighbor actually escape from her home with a case of domestic abuse, and the husband allegedly shot the police officer and killed him. I mean, we've got to address this across our society, and there's some simple things we can do. It doesn't feel rare when it's your daughter.
It's not a safety issue. It's a political issue.
Kathleen, you want to respond to that?
I think it's a monetary issue. The NRA is in the business of selling guns. These assault weapons are expensive guns that we have hundreds of millions of these guns in our society, more than we have people in America. And so I think what we have to look at is, how do you protect some of those Second Amendment rights for the true hunter, but how do you make sure an 18-year-old can't walk into a store in most states and be able to buy a gun like the one we saw with the AR-15?
Matt, we just have a few seconds left, but I want to give you the last word on that. As we move forward, what happens next? What do you see happening next?
Well, first, I am curious as to where we find the whitetail hunting clause in the Second Amendment. That's not really a relevant consideration. When you make solutions that are aimed at a tiny, tiny segment of crime, and I mean, one is too many, don't get me wrong, but when your solution is aimed at assault weapons, and that takes up a fraction of a tiny percent of crime, it really makes sense why people are beginning to question the motivations behind these laws and not trusting them and supporting them less and less every year.
Post 9/11, we took a tremendous action to make sure our planes and our airports were safe so that people would travel. We have to take action so that our students go to school and feel that they can go there and learn and focus.